There's a certain kind of person who moves through life carrying a quiet strength that often goes unnoticed by the world. They handle problems alone. They fall apart alone. They rebuild alone. And if you watch closely, you'll realize something strange. They never ask for help. Not when they're overwhelmed. Not when they're exhausted. Not when they're drowning. At first glance, it looks like confidence. It looks like independence. It looks like emotional self-control. And in many ways, it is. But it's also something more complex. Something more fragile, more human, and far less obvious than people realize. Most people grow up learning that asking for help is normal. Kids ask parents for assistance. Students ask teachers when they don't understand. Friends ask each other for advice. Support is meant to be traded naturally and effortlessly, like breathing. But for this person, help was never a language they learned to speak. Maybe nobody was available when they needed it. Maybe asking made things worse. Maybe help came attached to guilt, lectures, or punishment. Or maybe they discovered that doing it alone was safer than depending on someone who might not show up. Childhood is where most help-seeking behavior develops, quietly and invisibly. One child cries and is comforted. Another cries and is told to stop overreacting. One asks for help and receives support. Another asks for help and gets ignored. A third learns that asking for help means being a burden to parents, to siblings, to teachers, to everyone. So they adapt. They observe. They calculate. And slowly, without ever deciding it consciously, they become the kind of person who handles everything on their own. Teenage years only reinforce the pattern. While others share secrets, fears, stress, and heartbreaks with their friends, this person keeps everything behind a locked door. They don't talk about grades they're struggling with or family chaos happening at home. They don't ask for help studying, or help coping, or help understanding themselves. They learn to be the friend who listens, not the friend who needs anything. And adulthood doesn't erase the habit, it just makes it harder to notice. Now it shows up at work, in relationships, in big life decisions, in crises. This person pays rent alone, solves emotional problems alone, processes grief alone, carries responsibilities alone, and quietly survives things that would break most people in half. But here's the part outsiders never see. Not asking for help doesn't mean they don't need it. It doesn't mean they're immune to struggle. It doesn't mean their life is easier or lighter or simpler. It just means that somewhere along the way, help became unsafe, unavailable, or too expensive. Not financially, but emotionally. Most people misunderstand them. They assume they are proud, or stubborn, or detached, or emotionally closed. But the truth is almost never that simple. Not asking for help is not a personality trait. It's a survival strategy. And when you look closely, these people usually fall into 3 distinct psychological profiles. Profile 1, the learned self-reliant. This person didn't learn independence because they wanted to. They learned it because there was no alternative. Their parents were overwhelmed. Their household was chaotic. Their emotional needs were dismissed as dramatic, annoying, or unnecessary. They became the child who dressed themselves, comforted themselves, solved their own problems, and carried responsibilities far beyond their age. Psychologists call this parentification, and it leaves a deep imprint. If I don't handle it, nobody will. Profile 2, the protector. This person refuses help not because they can't receive it, but because they don't want to inconvenience anyone. They carry guilt like a second skin. They apologize for existing. They minimize their struggles by saying things like, "It's fine," "It's not a big deal," or "Other people have it worse." Somewhere in their life, they learned that other people's needs matter more than theirs. Asking for help feels selfish, so they swallow everything they feel and become the strong one for everyone else. Profile 3, the perfectionist. This person believes that asking for help exposes weakness, incompetence, or vulnerability. For them, strength means self-sufficiency. They grew up earning approval through performance, good grades, achievements, composure, maturity. Maybe they were praised for being so responsible or so independent. Maybe they were punished or humiliated for mistakes. Over time, they built an identity around being the one who never struggles, never fails, never needs. Asking for help would threaten that identity. But here's the twist. None of these profiles are actually independent. They are just experts at internalizing the weight that others distribute among relationships. People who never ask for help often become the ones who others rely on the most. They are the friend who gets called during crises, the sibling who handles emergencies, the employee who stays late quietly fixing problems, the partner who carries emotional labor without being asked. Society mistakes them for pillars of strength, when in reality, they are just people who learn to suffer without witnesses. Most people don't realize how much emotional calculus is involved in not asking for help. For the ones who grew up self-reliant, asking feels pointless. For the protectors, asking feels selfish. For the perfectionists, asking feels shameful. 3 different paths, 1 single outcome, silence. From the outside, silence looks simple, but internally, it's a labyrinth. Before asking for help, this person unconsciously evaluates hundreds of variables. Will I be seen differently? Will I be a burden? Will I disappoint someone? Will I owe something in return? Will it be used against me later? Will it make me look weak? Will it change how they see me? Will they even care? And by the time they finish that mental checklist, the moment has already passed, so they solve it alone. Psychologists have a name for this: self-silencing. It's not about pride, it's about protection. And here's the part most people overlook. Asking for help is not just a behavioral skill, it's an attachment skill. Children who receive consistent care develop what is called secure attachment, which makes asking for help feel natural, safe, and expected. But children who experienced inconsistency, emotional neglect, or volatility often develop avoidant attachment, which makes asking for help feel dangerous, pointless, or costly. Avoidant individuals learn early, if I need something, I'll handle it myself. They don't trust that others will respond reliably. They don't risk depending on anyone who might fail them. They don't gamble their emotional safety on someone else's availability. Then there's another layer, the social layer. Society loves people who handle things alone. It celebrates the strong one, the responsible one, the independent one, without ever asking how that person became that way. Children who raise themselves are called mature for their age. Teenagers who suppress emotions are called disciplined. Adults who never ask for help are called resilient. But nobody stops to think that maybe maturity was survival, discipline was silence, and resilience was isolation. And here's the paradox. People who never ask for help are often the first ones others ask for help. Their reliability becomes their identity. Their strength becomes their function. Their silence becomes their role. So what happens when they finally break? Most of them break quietly. They have breakdowns alone. They cry in the shower, in cars, late at night, behind closed doors. They collapse in subtle ways, losing sleep, losing weight, losing joy, losing direction, while still looking functional to everyone around them. If you pay attention, there are telltale signs. They say, "I'm fine," too quickly. They say, "It's not a big deal," even when it is. They change the subject when someone asks how they are. They redirect conversations to others. They minimize their pain to make others comfortable. And they do something else. They offer help instead of receiving it. If you tell them your problems, they'll listen deeply. They'll give advice. They'll show up. They'll help you move furniture, navigate heartbreak, survive crisis, whatever you need. But if you ask them what's going on in their life, they'll shrug. They'll say, "It's fine," or "It's handled," or "Don't worry about me." Not because there's nothing happening, but because they don't see themselves as someone others should carry. This creates an emotional imbalance. They become the caretaker, the stabilizer, the problem solver. And once people get used to that version of them, they stop asking deeper questions. Society ends up reinforcing the very behavior that isolates them. And here's where biology adds another layer. When someone handles everything alone for too long, their nervous system adapts. They enter a chronic state of hyper-independence, where the body produces stress hormones during vulnerability and relief during self-sufficiency. In other words, independence becomes a coping mechanism, and dependence becomes a threat. This explains why receiving help can feel uncomfortable, awkward, or even physically stressful for them. They might fidget, apologize repeatedly, deflect, or try to repay the help immediately. Not because they don't appreciate it, but because their nervous system has been trained to self-contain. And yet, beneath all of that, there's something tender. A quiet wish that someone would notice without being told. A longing to be helped without having to ask. A desire to feel safe enough to say, "I can't do this alone." But here's the painful truth. Most people who never ask for help have almost never experienced that kind of support. For them, help is not an expectation. It's a fantasy, but here's the twist that almost nobody talks about. People who never ask for help don't need someone to solve their problems. What they really need is permission. Permission to struggle. Permission to be human. Permission to not be the strong one all the time. Because strength without rest is not strength, it's exhaustion. Independence without support is not independence, it's isolation. So if they're not selfish and not weak and not stubborn and not cold, then why doesn't anyone notice? The answer is simple. They made it look easy. They solved things quietly. They survived silently. They handled crises without making noise. And the world rewarded that behavior by assuming they didn't need anything. Psychologists call this phenomenon competence masking. When someone performs well under adversity for long enough, people stop seeing the adversity and only see the performance. That's why the friend who always has it together is rarely checked on. That's why the sibling who never causes trouble is rarely asked how they're really doing. That's why the coworker who handles everything is rarely offered support. And that's why the partner who doesn't ask for much is often taken for granted. But here's the beautiful contradiction. Even the strongest people need someone. Even the most independent person breaks. Even the most resilient heart gets tired of being resilient. And here's something even more interesting. People who never ask for help are not bad at connection. They're actually incredible at connection. They show up. They listen. They support. They care. They carry. They give more than most people realize. Their weakness isn't vulnerability, it's direction. They know how to help others. They don't know how to let others help them. And when you ask them why, they'll usually say one of three things. I don't want to bother anyone. I don't want to be a burden. I don't know how. That last one, I don't know how, is the one nobody expects. Because asking for help isn't just a decision, it's a skill. And like any skill, it's learned. Children learn it from parents who show up. Teens learn it from friends who care. Adults learn it from relationships that allow vulnerability. If none of those existed, the skill never develops. So what would asking for help look like for them? It wouldn't look dramatic. It wouldn't look loud. It would be subtle. A message saying, "Are you free?" A sigh that lasts a second too long. And "I'm tired" that means more than it sounds. A change in tone that says, "I'm not okay," even if the words don't. To outsiders, it may seem small, but for them, it's monumental. And here's the part that breaks the pattern. When someone finally helps them safely, without judgment, without lectures, without conditions, it rewires something in the brain. Support becomes possible, dependence becomes safe, connection becomes real. But most of the time, that moment never comes, because they're surrounded by people who assume they don't need it. So let's end with a question, an honest one. If you're someone who never asks for help, what would happen if you did? What would actually happen if, for once, you said, "I can't do this alone"? Would the world collapse? Would people leave? Or is it possible, quietly, secretly, that someone would show up? Because here's the truth almost never spoken out loud. People who never ask for help are often surrounded by people who would help. They just don't know how to start the conversation. So if you're watching this and you recognize yourself, if you're the strong one, the responsible one, the listener, the caretaker, the problem solver, if you're the friend everyone relies on, if you're the sibling who never complains, if you're the partner who keeps everything inside, if you're the child who became the adult too early, here's the sentence you need to hear. You don't have to earn care. You don't have to deserve support. You don't have to break in order to be helped. Strength is not measured by how much you carry alone. Sometimes, strength is measured by how much you allow others to carry with you. And if you've gone most of your life without asking for help, it's not because you're weak. It's because you were never taught that help could be safe. Now you know. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing. We're building a space for the quiet fighters, the self-reliant, the protectors, and the perfectionists, the ones who carry more than people realize. You don't have to do life alone. Not here.